Pinkster celebrations. Pinkster Day, the name given to Pentecost Sunday, or Whit Sunday, in the Anglican Church, originally was a principal holiday of the Dutch in the Netherlands settlements. Later it was adopted by the English in New York, in parts of Pennsylvania, and in Maryland. It seems that the earliest reference to the popular name of the holiday occurred in a sermon book of 1667 by Adrian Fisher. Story of the descent of the Holy Ghost on the Apostles on Pinksterdag. After the first day or so of Pinkster, the celebration was often prolonged for as much as the full week after Pentecost. Black men and women took over completely with their Congo dances, dancing as they had in Africa. The festivals attracted large crowds of white spectators from both city and rural sections. Local historians wrote about Pinkster, the Carnival of the Africans, and novelists incorporated scenes from the Great Saturnalia of the New York Blacks in their fictional works, in the same way as writers described the exotic dancing of the black celebrants in the place Congo of New Orleans at the beginning of the 19th century.
Hi, I'm Chief Baba Neil Clark. I'm playing the African drum, and I think it's significant for Pinkster because in North America, the African drum was actually outlawed. It's one of the few instruments that Africans played that was outlawed. So the fact that the African drum was played for Pinkster, which took place for almost 200 years, it makes it very significant. Historically, when people talk about the African drum in North America, they talk about Congo Square, but there are evidences that the African drum was played throughout the eastern United States. The significance of Pinkster is that it was played publicly and people were actually allowed to play the drum. When people were brought from Africa in a condition of enslavement, they did not have the opportunity to bring their instruments with them. So they had to go about recreating their instruments when they arrived here. Traditionally, African drums were made from many different things, from carved tree trunks, from carved limbs of trees, from ceramic pots, from different materials depending on the environment that they were in. The Africans that were here during the period of enslavement of the Dutch colonies were primarily from West Africa and West Central Africa, countries of the Congo and Angola. So a lot of the drumming reflected the cultures of Congo and Angola. When the people arrived here, they did not have the opportunity to bring the drums with them, but they did bring the knowledge of how to make drums. So they would take different materials, different receptacles, and they would adapt them to make musical instruments. They used many different things. They took a hollow shell and they put animal skins, but they also used garden tools. So they would take tools that they made in the garden and tools that they used in the kitchen. So they had many different kinds of percussion instruments that they would use, but the drum in particular is probably the most sophisticated of the African musical instruments that people were playing. And they play it by using their hands or using sticks. And there are different notes that you get from the drum. So you have 5 basic notes. You have a bass, you have a tone, you have a slap, you have a muff, and you have a choke. And together these make the scale that is played on the African drum. The rhythms would be in the moment. Now, depending on where the individuals came from, they would play rhythms that were reflective of the region. So we don't have any recordings of that time. So we don't really know. And music is a very amorphous and evolving activity. So just like we know we have music from different eras here, you have music that is no longer played at that time. But so the music is language. It has everything to do with the language that people speak, and it has everything to do with the dances that people do, and that would be the inspiration for what was being played. But, you know, we could have a rhythm that sounds like, or we could have a rhythm that sounds like, or we could have a rhythm that sounds like, the variety of rhythms are endless. Pinkster took on many different forms because, again, we have to remember that people who were enslaved were required to work all of the time for free. So Pinkster was an opportunity when their owners would go to church on Sunday. The following Monday is when the Pinkster festivals would begin. And depending on where it was located in the Hudson River Valley, sometimes it would be for a day, sometimes it would be for a couple of days. Pinkster is documented to, in some places, have taken place for a week at a time. As a matter of fact, we know that in Albany, what we know as Capitol Hill in Albany was actually Pinkster Hill. And it was like a big fairground where they would clear the land and they would set up booths, and they would have a dancing ground, and people would have the opportunity to sell surplus goods from their garden and the gardens that they grew, and items that they manufactured, like bags and things that they might have made that they would trade and sell during the Pinkster Festival. People had the opportunity to travel and meet family members who might have been at a distant farm. So during that period of time, Pinkster, a lot of the restrictions were relaxed, and people had an opportunity to travel and engage in what we know as festival activities, cooking, singing, dancing, playing music. And again, depending on where it was, would depend on the extent and the depth that the festival would look like and sound like. The Pinkster Festival was an opportunity for people who were enslaved at that time to have the freedom to go around, to move around, to play their music. During the Pinkster Festival, they were given time off from working in the fields, and they would take their instruments that they had and they would move around from farm to farm, from plantation to plantation, and they would have the opportunity to create music in the moment. So when we think about what we call music known as jazz, and people attribute that to New Orleans and what happened in Congo Square, where African people were playing their musical instruments, in Pinkster, for 200 years, you had people who were musicians who would get together and they would play and they would create music in the moment, very much like what we know today as jazz music. So it was not rehearsed. There were no rehearsals. There were no particular songs that they were playing. They would create artistically, musically, music in the moment for people to sing, for people to dance, and it was spontaneous. And this took place in the Hudson River Valley for close to 200 years.